a radical leftist elected from the state of Idaho, as I recall. And he put out what was called the Church Committee Report, and it sought to eviscerate the Central Intelligence Agency. And it took many, many, many years for that agency to recover. And as you can see, before they leave the majority position in the Senate, they want to spit this report out under this radical president to destroy another institution that is actually quite necessary in this country. Waterboarding is torture. Sorry, I don't accept that, and I never will. But whatever you call it, Nancy Pelosi was fully aware of it. I know that as a matter of fact. It's been reported. She was briefed on it. It's hard to believe Dianne Frankenfeinstein wasn't aware of it either. And maybe there were other forms of quote-unquote torture or what have you done to the enemy. And you will hear commentators on TV and radio, even so-called conservatives, wring their hands at all this. I won't. We're at war with head cutters, with eye gougers, with slave masters, with rapists, with Islamo-Nazi subhuman cockroaches who've attacked our country and attack every other country that rejects barbarism. But I have a little secret for you, and I'm sure you won't hear it in the New York Times or any other place, lest they catch it from me, because I've done my research, which is what I always do. There was an excellent book written by Andrew Roberts called Masters and Commanders, How Churchill, Roosevelt, Allen Brooke, and Marshall Won the War in the West, 1941 to 45. On this 73rd anniversary of the declaration of war against Imperial Japan for attacking Pearl Harbor the day before, it's worth noting facts. And Andrew Roberts, of all places, the Daily Beast, May 2009, commented on this book, which relates to occurrences in World War II. And I want you to be aware of this, about the greatest generation. And he writes, a slight air of unreality has permeated the debate over enhanced interrogation techniques in the war against terror, with historians embarrassingly studying their toe caps over the issue. For the truth is that there has not been a war in history in which torture has not been employed in some form or another, and sometimes to excellent effect. Now, I don't accept, ladies and gentlemen, that waterboarding is torture, but let's move on. When troops need information about enemy capabilities and intentions, and they usually need it fast, moral and ethical conventions, especially the one signed in Geneva in 1929, have repeatedly been ignored in the bid to save lives. I said to save lives. This isn't some damn game. And I'm sick of the politicization of every damn thing in this country. In the conflict generally regarded today as the most ethical war in history, World War II, enhanced interrogation techniques were regularly used by the Allies, and senior politicians knew it perfectly well, just as we now discover that Nancy Pelosi did in the early stages of the war against terrorism. The very success of the D-Day landings themselves can largely be put down to the enhanced interrogation techniques that were visited upon several of the 19 Nazi agents who were infiltrated into the Great Britain and turned by the British Secret Intelligence Service, SIS, between 1939 and 1945. Operation Fortitude, the deception plan that fooled the Germans into stationing 450,000 Wehrmacht troops 130 miles north of Normandy beaches, entirely dependent upon German intelligence, believing the real attack was going to take place elsewhere. The reason that Admiral Wilhelm Canaris, the head of the Abwehr, was utterly convinced of this was because every single one of his 19 agents, who he did not know had been turned, told him so. If anyone believes that SIS persuaded each of these 19 hard-bitten Nazi spies to fall in with Operation Fortitude by merely offering them tea, biscuits, and lectures in democracy, they're being profoundly naive. If anyone believes the SIS persuaded them in any other way but brute force, sleep deprivation, and so forth, they're wrong. An SIS secret house located in Ham Common near Richmond on the outskirts of London was the location where the will of those agents was broken, using advanced interrogation techniques that reportedly started with sleep deprivation, but went on to gross mental and physical abuse. The result? Many thousands of Allied servicemen's lives were saved because the German 15th Army stayed well away from the beaches, such as Omaha, Utah, and Sword, and another 100,000 others were stationed in Norway, for another attack that never occurred. Now, the wartime SIS being what it was, full first-hand details of the enhanced interrogation techniques have not emerged, either from the British or the German side, since the war. In a country where the very existence of the wartime decryption operation, known as Ultra, was successfully kept secret until 1971, it was never likely that former SIS officers would have revealed precisely how the agents were turned. But the talk and gossip in the intelligence community is another matter. They undoubtedly saw gross violations of the Geneva Conventions, as every means was used, fair and foul, to ensure the safety of Great Britain. Today, Fortitude is generally considered to be the most successful strategic deception operation in the history of warfare. Elsewhere, one only has to read George MacDonald Fraser's excellent autobiography, Quartered Safe Out Here, with its description of the ill treatment of Japanese POWs by Indian soldiers of the 17th Division, to recognize that not all torture was committed by the Axis in World War II. Did Winston Churchill know what was going on in the cellar dungeons of the House and Ham? Of course he did. But like Nancy Pelosi and other politicians, he understandably preferred not to dwell on this less auspicious side of the defense of freedom. As I show in my recently published book, he writes, Masters and Commanders, reviewed here, Churchill always advocated the toughest option in any issue that came before his war cabinet, be it over the bombing of German cities, allowing Mahatma Gandhi to die in his hunger strike, retaliating over the destruction of village, and so on. The idea that he would have balked on ethical grounds over the breaking and turning of Nazi agents, knowing how vitally necessary that was for the liberation of Europe, is ludicrous. So, he writes, when we wring our hands about the waterboarding that took place at the hands of the CIA and their proxies in secret locations around the world, let us not pretend that such techniques are in any way historically exceptional, for in fact they constitute the norm. The only surprising thing is the extent of the information that we've been given about such unpleasantness, but ultimately necessary practices. Sometimes the defense of liberty requires making some pretty unpalatable decisions, but it was ever thus. So we will sit in the comforts of our homes and our businesses and our schools and our classrooms, on the Senate floor, the House floor, and we will wring our hands as our sons and daughters are not sent to war, as our sons and daughters have not volunteered to go to war, as our families were not in the World Trade Center, as our families were not in the part of the Pentagon that was hit, or in the jetliner that went down in central Pennsylvania, or were not decapitated in the Middle East, and so on and so forth. Safely ensconced in the warmth of our homes, wringing our hands about how you fight terrorism. This is disgusting. Absolutely outrageous, what we do to ourselves. And you know what's interesting? We the people are not doing this to ourselves. The governing elite, whatever we call these people, who get elected to office and are so damn power hungry, it is they who are destroying this nation. Institution by institution, tradition by tradition, custom by custom. I believe bombing these Islamo-Nazi subhuman cockroaches off the face of the earth. Why waste your time torturing them? That's a rhetorical question, ladies and gentlemen. But look how we bounce from left-wing attack on the nation to left-wing attack on the nation, and how it's wrapped up as news. Now we're going to have a torture report. These are the headlines. Everybody's waiting for the release of the torture report tomorrow. 2 weeks ago, everybody's waiting for the Ferguson grand jury. Everybody's waiting for what's next to attack America with. We're barely done with what's going on in Berkeley, California. You know, people are very busy there. A lot of white guys protesting. Yes. And so here we are. Every single national issue driven by the left, and not just liberals, the radical hard left who hate this country. Every time there's a survey, before the elections, during the elections, after the election, the people are concerned about the economy. They're concerned about illegal immigration. What's being done to the economy? Nothing to help it. How about illegal immigration? More of it. And by the way, the government has an idea. You know how we end illegal immigration, Mr. Producer? We call it legal immigration. So there we are. It's over. Fixed. Wait a minute. Where are the illegals? Can't use that word. There aren't any. They're illegals. But to show you how serious this Congress is about your national security and about the men and women who volunteer to defend this nation so most of us don't have to, here's the New York Post, just in time for Christmas. $577 billion defense authorization bill headed for a vote in the Senate next week, packed with goodies that have nothing to do with national security. I thought they did away with this. One provision pushes forward a National Women's History Museum in Washington, D.C. By the way, have you gone to Washington, D.C. lately and seen these museums? It used to be you go to the museum, there are dinosaurs, there's history, there's artwork. Now there's a museum for Indians and women and African Americans and this group and that group and another group. The hell's going on? I know what's going on. Also tucked in the bill are pet projects that would establish a Harriet Tubman National this is a defense bill. Harriet Tubman National Historic Park in Auburn, New York, and study the creation of federal historic sites in Queens, Brooklyn, and Manhattan. In all, more than a quarter of the 1,648-page defense bill, listen to this, a quarter of it, more of it, is dedicated to federal land use projects, angering some conservatives upset that a critical defense bill is slathered with pork projects. Tom Goburn, we're going to miss this guy. I don't agree with everything that he says, but we're going to miss this guy. Republican Oklahoma tweeted that Congress was sneaking through hundreds of millions of dollars worth of pork into unrelated defense bill via backroom deals. The House passed, this is your Speaker of the House, Johnny Boehner. You know what? He's another one I despise. Yes, the House passed the bill Thursday, 300 to 119. So here's what they do. They blackmail the military and those who support it. Yeah, we'll pass that budget, but over a quarter of that bill is going to deal with stuff that has nothing to do with national security. Now, if you want to fund the men and women in the military, if you want to give them health care and pensions, if you want to give them the kind of treatment they deserve, well then, we need to put a park in Manhattan. Armed Services Committee leaders in Congress hatched a deal to include a federal lands package that was being developed by separate National Resources Committee. New York lawmakers, including Senators Charles Schumer and Kristen Gillibrand. That Gillibrand's a complete phony and a fraud. Ooh, she was a moderate Democrat in Congress. Now another radical left-wing knucklehead. They insisted if a rider was to be attached that the Empire State Building be the Empire State be well represented. Gillibrand considered the New York provisions worthy projects. The defense bill adds on several projects that already passed the House but not in the Senate. Grace Meng, Democrat Queens, led passage of legislation for $250,000 study of the John Brown House and the old Quaker Meeting House. Unfortunately, it didn't gain traction in the Senate. Good try, though, Gracie. Separately, Representative Hakeem Jeffries, Democrat Brooklyn, pushed through legislation for $150,000 study to add the Prison Ship Martyrs Monument in Brooklyn in the National Park System. I didn't know there was a Prison Ship Martyrs Monument in Brooklyn. I'm sure it's very popular. Another provision would establish two national historical park sites to honor Harriet Tubman, one in Auburn and another in Maryland, $12 million over 5 years. This is a military bill, a defense bill. In May, Maloney ushered through bipartisan legislation in the House to study the formation of a privately funded women's history museum. That vote was 383 to 33, which means an overwhelming majority of Republicans voted for that, too. You think these clowns, these fools, you think these people would be set if we were attacked?